This has already been covered by Thunderfoot and everybody else. I'm just going to give my take on it because I'm a Me Too. Bowel movement. In the year 2006, a documentary, that's in not just quotes, that's in candy-striped, Comic Sans Serif quotes documentary, Battle of Chernobyl. Nothing like HBO's whatever the hell it's called. I don't even care what its name is. A guy named Vasili Nesterenko is the basis for one of the characters' statements in the HBO series. Now, there's a problem with this, and I'm going to be addressing this in plain, simple English. The only goal any scientist has in this world, besides doing whatever they're doing for research or whatever, is to stomp the living dog shit out of every falsehood you run into. Not perpetuate them because you're an activist. By 2006, this old fuck was repeating things that were never under any conditions true in any time or space. He's dead now, so I guess his family can sue me. 1,400 kilograms of corium. Corium is a material name for what happens when you get a meltdown in the core of a nuclear reactor. That's where the term comes from. Reaching water would create a multi-megaton explosion. Okay, what are the possibilities for doing an explosion? I'm going to cover chemical, mechanical, and nuclear, because those are the three methods. Mechanical explosion or propulsion, steam. Chemical, that's like igniting fuel, burning fuel, whatever. They all have physical limitations to them that perpetual motion machine makers fucking hate, because you can't lie about them. Especially if you combine them, because people combine them trying to think that they can do something else with them. And yes, Lee Harvey Warble Garble will show up to totally do the magic bullet and tell me a bleve doesn't work that way. Fuck you, Warble Garble. So let's get on with it. A steam explosion cannot be more powerful than a nuclear explosion, because then we would just make steampunk nukes. Prove me wrong, I'll get the coffee cup on the table and sit right next to Chowder Crowder just for the fun of it, just to annoy the shit out of him, because I don't think he wants to go near me, because I'll be more annoying than he could ever be. If steam explosions worked well enough to outdo nukes, we would be dropping freight trains on Company B over in another country. What about chemical explosions? Again, if chemical explosives of any kind worked better than a nuke pound for pound for output yield, we would use them instead. We use them mostly now because we don't want to drop nuclear warheads. So now we're left with this problem. Invent new physics so that 1.4 metric tons of uranium, I'm using uranium, I'm not even using corium, I'm not even using uranium oxide that's not really enriched. This is unenriched uranium. I'm saying uranium, okay? I'm trying to make it actually work to see if you could. The reason you don't use weapon-grade uranium in a nuclear power plant is so this won't happen. If it's burning or mixing with graphite or cement, it's not enhancing its ability to detonate, it's reducing it. What about a chemical reaction that produces a bunch of energetic material like hydrogen gas? So we're going to do the hydrogen water-powered car again? Again, if you put energy into the water to split the atoms away from each other, and then use a chemical explosion by combining it again with oxygen, no matter how much shuck and jive and sleight of hand you use, you're still dealing with charging up your system using heat or electricity or electromagnetism, and then expending it by just releasing it again in chemical energy. You would not be able to get more energy out than you put into the system. It's not a triggered power source. You'd have to be dealing with the most energetic source, which is the uranium. Well, it's 1.4 metric tons. Uranium is an uranium is a hyperdense element. That's a little over a 1 foot across basketball-sized blob of uranium. Yeah, 1,400 kilograms of uranium works out to, I'm not kidding, I'm trying to make this able to happen, but if you want to use the original material, corium, it's a little bit basketball. That's how much material. The first atom bomb, Fat Man and Little Boy, the first atom bombs used a lot of matter, and 1 gram of the material actually fissioned, okay? Atom bombs, as powerful as they are, pound for pound, it's 1 gram out of a lot of kilograms. The really high efficiency atom bombs we have today use even less material, but it does it by doing an incredibly hard to make work bomb. That's why it's hard to make them. If you could just drop a basketball sized blob of corium into water and get a 4 megaton explosion, then you would just do that instead. You would just have a container of water you would force it into and have it detonate. Or you would find a building, flood the basement, and then sneak in a 1.4 metric ton blob of uranium, 1 block at a time smaller, and then drop it in one shot as corium by having it drop all at once into a funnel and drop into the water really quickly. You'd have a 4 megaton explosion and you could prep this up by just literally dropping it into a swimming pool. Where do they store the corium and uranium when they get it out? You know, if they have corium they're removing, what do they put it into to store it? Feckin' water. No, it doesn't have the ability to detonate with 4 megatons. But let's do the math. 1 ton of nuclear fuel produces 40 to 45 gigawatt days of energy total. That's its capacity. A 4 megaton explosion is 200 gigawatt days in 1 blink of an eye. Again, weapons grade uranium can do that, but fuel grade uranium specifically shouldn't do that because you don't want them accidentally blowing up. So the material in the building, if you didn't mix it and cut it with graphite and ground up rocks and random metals melting to it so it's lava, would put out 40 to 45 gigawatt days per ton. You have to take 200 gigawatt days and compact it into a blink of an eye. And you have to do it with less than a ton of material because you do not want this thing to be very big. Now the way you do that is with precision detonation. 5 metric tons minimum would be need. 5 metric tons, 5,000 kilograms of uranium. Now I'm not talking about power plant uranium, which is significantly less likely to detonate and actually lower energy density in some ways. I'm talking about using weapons grade uranium. If it could detonate, and that's based on a 2,000 gigawatt hour total capacity being dumped out in 1 millisecond or less. The thermal maximum capacity of the nuclear reactor we're talking about, this all came from, had a total output of 3 gigawatts thermal energy output. That's the most efficient way to burn off the energy. A detonation is least efficient. So now we're literally stacking the deck against being able to even make an explosion of any size. What's the actual output of this blob, this basketball-sized blob of corium? A cubic meter of uranium is around 19,000 kilograms. Or 1,200 pounds of uranium is 1 cubic foot. A 1,400 kilogram, 1.4 metric ton, 1.6 cubic foot uranium, or 4 cubic foot uranium dioxide, which is what was really there, because it weighs less because it's thinned out. That, at 4 cubic feet, cube root it, you end up with an 18-inch basketball of the material. If it's the uranium, it's 14 inches. Cube roots are weird. Low enrichment blob. What would be its kiloton rating, not megaton? 0.1. It would produce the equivalent to 100 tons of TNT if you could detonate it. maximum theoretical output. That's if it was just if it was low enrichment uranium, by the way. And it's not even an amount we can actually detonate. It's not enough material to cause a detonation that would be puny. But, you know, in some theoretical universe you could get 100 kiloton, no, actually 100-ton explosion. Sustained criticality, slow-mo, prompt critical, instantaneous, well, almost, versus atomic detonation, extremely instantaneous, are not the same thing. Water expands when converted into steam no more than 1,000 to 1,600 times its diameter. It cannot produce that much of an explosion. Because a steam explosion, yes, I'm including bleves, warble garble, won't do an atom bomb. You can't steampunk an atom bomb. If you could, we'd do that instead, because then we could make non-radioactive atom bombs. We would just load up a ship, a sub, park it off the beach where we're trying to blow it up, and then detonate it. We wouldn't drop them from airplanes. That was a bug. Brando joke. What about a chemical explosion because someone desperately wants to make this physicist, not an activist, in 2006, saying something bombastically stupid, and having it repeated in another docu-series on HBO? Well, we'll make it a chemical explosion. Hydrogen explosion. That's the only one you got to work with? Okay. Quench superheated nuclear fuel, corium. Let it boil off the water and let its zirconium, because we're going to throw that in, absorb all the oxygen so we get a bunch of hydrogen. It still expands only 1,000 or 2,001, but we'll just do 2,001. Fuck it. That's also the expansion rate, if you didn't know about, from a chemical explosion with solids. Any solid to gas or liquid to gas conversion is going to be about 1,000 or 1,600 to 1. Okay. So you'd have to start off with, even if you were doing a fantasy universe, to make a 4 megaton bomb, you'd have to make it a 4 kiloton explosion, potential thermal. It isn't. 40 gigawatt days. Yeah, 40 gigawatt days. That's, it's still hundreds and hundreds of times too small. Next. If you could have the water turn into hydrogen completely, the entire amount, yeah, I looked this up, it still wouldn't produce an explosion that would have been interesting. The steam explosion bleve would have thrown radioactive material up in the air and been as bad as the fallout from an atom bomb, right? No, actually it wouldn't. That also isn't true, because it wouldn't have taken out Minsk, 320 kilometers from Chernobyl. No. Well, what about the radioactive material that was really released? Oh, you mean facts? Yeah, that shit coated the entire planet, got in the upper atmosphere and the troposphere, went all over the fucking planet. It was the worst contamination incident we've had that I know of. No, Fukushima isn't as bad, because it didn't release as much shit, because we didn't detect as much shit in the United States and at the location. Chernobyl released a bunch of shit over land. It is still there. Over the ocean, it's still in the ocean, but it goes to the bottom. Doesn't affect people as much, and also it tends to go to the deepest part, because it's a heavier material. Light materials stay in the air longer, but they drop eventually too. 1 metric ton isn't 5, okay? Even if it was really literally uranium, it doesn't have the yield. And then, of course, the next one. Well, how do they make the really lightweight bombs? They put a very tiny amount together and squeeze it so it emulates the effect of being compacted like a heavy mass. They create a supercritical mass in a smaller space by squeezing it at the point that the uranium, or whatever, uranium in this case, is squeezed so tight that it becomes a plasma. That's a very different... It's not the same as dropping uranium in a fucking pool of water. Thanks for watching. Have a good day. Good luck with that. Bye.